Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high-performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson-Ridley. Today, I am joined by Maja Miller, who I am really excited to have on the show. I will introduce her momentarily, but I actually found her. I did one of her courses and found her, and I was like, this lady's awesome, and we're just going to reach out and see if she'll come on, and she said yes. So, but who Maja is she spent almost a decade in Hollywood, burning the candle at both ends. I think many of us can relate to that. She walked away from that, moved back to Austin, or moved to Austin, and then found her unhealthy habits, followed her into more of her work doing, I think, owned, was it Pilates studios?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's gone through a lot of transition. She ended up, having shot adrenals, gaining a lot of weight, hormone issues, all the stuff, and ended up finding functional nutrition through the Institute of Integrated Nutrition and also the functional diagnostic nutrition program, I guess is what you've been through. So I'm excited to have you on. We have a lot that we're going to probably cover in all this, but first, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And likewise, I felt like, we're kind of birds of a feather. So I always look forward to opportunities to connect with other like-minded women, especially. So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to launch in, I know some of your backstory and stuff because I've been around some of your work and whatnot, but maybe just share with us part of your journey, because I've seriously paraphrased it, but how you've gotten to where you're at and kind of what you do now. And we're going to have all kinds of things to talk about from that, I think. But
yeah, well, my background is in digital media and technology. I was the youngest director at a Fortune 5 company. And I really kind of fell into the belief that, you had to work really hard and burn the candle at both ends. And starting really early on in my life, I was having a lot of medical problems. And I would go to a lot of doctors and I talked to nutritionists and, did all of the things. And pretty much everyone just told me I had anxiety, so take this pill. I had IBS and take this pill. And, you've got autoimmune stuff and there's nothing we can do about it. And I just didn't accept that as an answer. My entire career, I think with a lot of high performing women, I really felt like the more that I could do, the more valuable I was. And so I found myself really disconnected right around 2010. I felt really disconnected from my body. I felt really disconnected from my family and my friends. And I just had one of those moments where I went to go for a run and I was tying my shoes. And in my head, I think we all have these little voices. And in my head, I said, is this all there is to life? And that really just led me to my journey of functional nutrition. I did a lot of study to figure out what is actually going on with me. And that was the beginning of, saying goodbye to this big job that I had in LA. And I moved to Austin, Texas to launch a health and wellness lifestyle brand called Core 180. I had multiple locations. And like you said, some of my habits and my beliefs really followed me into that startup. And for some reason, I thought maybe if I worked in the health and wellness industry, that maybe that would make me more healthy and more well. And it just made me more stressed out. And so it was during that time that it was 10 years, we ran the business and I made a lot of personal changes around mindset, around environmental things. I ended up going back to school and I launched my first nutrition program. And it really wasn't even a nutrition program. It was a lifestyle program. Most of my clients were women. They had same things, anxiety, depression, couldn't get pregnant. And they, were working out and they thought they were eating healthy. And that's a whole loaded subject in and of itself. And they would ask me how are you, by that time I had really made a lot of changes in my life. And they asked me, how are you doing this? And I decided to launch my first 3-month program. Quite honestly, I thought it was going to fail. I didn't think that anybody would be interested. And so I decided to not build it out before I sold it. And in my first week, I sold $20,000 of my first program, and all of a sudden realized, like, wow, this is actually needed. People are drowning. They're looking for a lifeline, and that really led me to the career I have now. I've since shut that business down in order to be able to reach more women digitally than I could through my brick and mortar locations, and so here we are today.
Yeah, which is awesome. And there's a lot of similarities in our story, moving from brick and mortar into virtual and all of that, but also just in like the journey of recognizing, the need for change in what we're doing and evolving with that. And I think like a lot of women who listen to the show, I know can relate to that, because either they're in careers where they've been doing, what you and I experienced, burning the candle at both ends, and the tricky part, and maybe we can start here, is figuring out how to not have those habits follow you. Because even I noticed this in like going into a virtual practice. It was like, I either was like doing nothing or working way too hard still, because I'm always at home, right? And yeah. Maybe you've experienced this. And so it's like we have to expand. And I did an interview earlier today when we're recording this, where we talked a lot about like having just approaching life with curiosity and like observing certain things about ourselves. So I don't know what tips you have for that, but like as you recognized the patterns and whatnot, like how do you start transforming that so it doesn't just follow you?
Yeah. I think you have to start small. And I think that we have a tendency to feel like we have to make big changes in life. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, I fell into the same pattern where I would try to make these massive changes, and all that did was stress me out and overwhelm me. And, humans are hardwired to do two things. The first is to seek pleasure, and then the other is to avoid pain. And this is how we've been able to, perpetuate the human race. And so for me, I had to start really small, I had to think small in order to win big. And so it was really this gradual progression. I don't drink anymore, for example, but if somebody would have told me even 3 or 4 years ago that I wouldn't drink, I would have told them that they were absolutely crazy. And so I think for me personally, the philosophy around starting small with small things so that you can feel, success right away, and build on top of kind of a bedrock foundation, that was mission critical for me. But at the beginning, it was a lot of trial and error, where I would try to, make these massive changes. I'm going gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, like all at once. I'm going to work out every single day. All of, the cleanses that I did all of the things. And I learned a lot. I'm so grateful for those experiences. But what I found worked better for me, it was more sustainable, I had higher adherence, was to be able to start really, really small.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, because that's like, to me, that just sounds like every New Year's resolution, right? It's like, let's do all the things.
New year, new you, which I think is complete BS, right?
Yeah. And, when we try to use willpower to do that, it usually backfires. And that's why most people peter out after like 3 weeks.
Willpower is like a battery. And eventually that battery runs out. And there's actually a lot of studies that talk about willpower. And, now we're getting into conscious and subconscious brain. This isn't the woo-woo stuff that I'm talking about, the subconscious or anything like that. Like, we understand brain science. We understand the structure of the brain. We know that the most primal, the most primal part of the brain is incredibly powerful. We know that 95% of all brain function happens in the subconscious brain. And so, oftentimes, and unfortunately, oftentimes in the wellness industry, it's our wellness practitioners and the gurus that are, telling us, it's your fault if you had more willpower, if you moved more, ate less, then you would be successful. And we just know that that's not true. And that belief, unfortunately, causes a lot of suffering in the lives of women, which I think are really fall prey to a lot of these. I mean, there's really no other way to say it, but predatory practices. So when you start looking at the brain and kind of dissecting the sections of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and all the other awesome parts of our brain, you have a little bit more understanding of why we are unable to use willpower in order to make things stick. The reality is the more you focus, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to eat the thing, I'm not going to eat the pizza, I'm not going to eat the cupcake. Eventually, there is an event that happens and you crumble, because willpower is just like a battery. And we all know what happens with our iPhones or, our mobile devices. Eventually, they run out of juice.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that you just said there that we can dive into, but I think it's so true, and it's one of the failings. Like, we've been taught that it's our fault. It's our fault that we've gotten to the point that we're at. And I say, and it sounds like you talk about this a lot too, and I know you do, like, it's not really true. Like, there's a lot that we know, and there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot out in the world. Like, sugar is one of the most addictive substances that there is. It's worse than heroin,
Yeah.
or cocaine. And so
If you look at a brain scan of somebody that ate sugar and somebody that had cocaine, it lights up the pleasure centers of the brain in the exact same ways.
yeah, it does. And when you really think about, like, what's the habit that you're trying to break, I mean, that's a lot of layers. Like, people go to rehab for that stuff, and we're trying to just do it on our own and with our own willpower. So how do we, I guess my next question is, like, how do we move beyond that? I know your program that I did actually as part of my own weight loss thing is called Be More, Lose More, but how do we start to move so we're not relying on willpower, but actually, like, creating some transformation in our lives?
Yeah, it's funny because this has definitely changed for me over the course of 10 years. And where I started with a lot of my work and my programming was, what do I need to do? And really kind of getting stuck into this, like, do more to weigh less lie.
Yeah.
And there's really three kinds of people out there. And these, there's kind of the first, kind of person really is, they kind of play this like martyr or victim, mentality. And the martyr will say things like, once I have something, right? Once I have the job, or once I have the money, or once I, have the guy or girl, then I will, then I'll do the things that I need to do in order to have what I want to have, right? And then there's the other person. And so this is very kind of like victim mentality. You have to have something before you can do something, before you can be something. And then the other, and I've definitely spent a lot of time there. I know initially with my first startup, I would say things like, well, man, if I only had, if I only had more funding, then I'd be able to do this business activity, and then I'd be able to have more revenue. So the being and the doing is kind of contingent on having something external. And then the other person is kind of the worker bee. And so this person, I always like to say, they live a do, have, be life. So I have to do more. I have to do all the diets. I have to change, I have to change my nutrition. I have to move my body so that I can, have a healthier body, and then I can and lose weight, and then I'll be happy. And we often kind of like toggle between those two people. And for me, in my personal development, I had this like massive aha moment the first time that I realized that there's this third kind of person out there. And this person, I call her the creator. And she says things like, I must be consistent, persistent, integrous, kind, loving, so that I can change my nutrition, move my body, sleep more. Then I will, then I will have all of the things that I want, right? Because how you feel in your own body is really, or how successful you are in life, what you have in life, it really depends on how you feel in your own body. And so for me, I had this massive aha moment that I realized that I had to, this sounds like so corny. Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. He didn't go out and say, go out and do all the things you need to do so that you can be the change that, he said be, and you have to start internally. And I start with identity because it's the single most important part of like feeling great and living an amazing life. And I just think that a lot of people get wrapped up in this, like, do, like, give me the meal plan, give me the workout plan, give me the sleep hygiene plan. And what we don't understand is that who we are being enables what we're able to do. Because when we are not persistent, consistent, kind, loving, all of these things, then it is very difficult to take action consistently over a long period of time. And I actually kind of came to this like massive aha moment around identity, who you are at a subconscious level, really well after I had had hundreds of women go through my program. And I couldn't understand initially why, they'd be successful for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, but inevitably they would, something would happen. They would have a stressful day at work, or their partner was a jerk. And instead of going home and eating the food that they prepped, they would say, F it, cruise through the drive-through. And that would oftentimes spin them out of control. And I bet you a lot of your listeners and viewers can probably relate to that cycle where, you make a promise to yourself, something and you're successful for a little bit, something happens. And then all of a sudden you say, F it, you spin out of control. Then comes the beating yourself up. I don't have willpower. Like, I can't pull it together. And we tell ourselves these stories that are ingrained in our subconscious brain, which we know handles 95% of the processing that we do in our brain. And then that cycle kind of repeats itself over and over again. And so for me, I'm constantly telling people, don't get stuck in the do more to weigh less lie. And you have to be more in order to lose more. You have to be something in order to lose the weight, or the, negative self-talk, or the toxic people, or all the things that are kind of like weighing you down and holding you back from really living this life of like possibility and potential.
Yeah, so powerful. So many things that we can in that. And, I think it's so important because, and I've seen, and I even got stuck in the cycle. Like, I had my own struggles with weight that I couldn't figure out, and I was ashamed and embarrassed because I help other women lose weight all the time, and I was like, what?
I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been there.
And so you're like, I in listening to you, and we have a similar background in where a lot of our personal growth and development came from, in that, but just that concept of being, it was like, it doesn't matter what you do, like you can do all the things, but if who you're being is someone who's stuck and frustrated and depressed and doesn't believe that you can lose the weight, or you can have the job, or the relationship, like whatever, then you're going to stay in that place. Like, that is the key that transforms the whole thing.
Yeah, I one of my favorite books is a book called Essentialism. And have you read that book?
I haven't read that one. I'm going to add it.
So it's really an awesome book, and it talks about there's two kinds of people in life. There's the essentialist and there's the non-essentialist. And if you take a look at, like, if you can, draw a little circle of the non-essentialist, it has all these like tiny little arrows coming out of it, right? And they're really short. You don't get very far. And the arrows really kind of depict your energy. And so non-essentialists are they're scattered, they're focused on a lot of things. And as a result, they don't get very far, right? But there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of activity, but there's just not a lot of progress. And the non-essentialist focuses on one thing. And it's a circle with one really tall arrow that goes all the way up. And I really believe that identity, who you are being at a conscious and subconscious level, is the single most important thing that you can focus on. Because putting the doing in front of the being is kind of like putting the cart in front of the horse. And we know that that cart's not getting very far, right? And so identity, is the single most important point of focus. And identity allows you to take action. So when you identify as somebody that's persistent, consistent, loving, it allows you to take action. And if you want new results in your life, you have to take new action. And taking action actually gets you through this, I call it like no man's land, where maybe you don't quite love yourself. And because I think a lot of us struggle with that, right? Like self-worth, self-acceptance, self-love, and integrity, which I define as keeping your promises and agreements, simply saying what, mean what you say, and do what you say, right? Mm-hmm. And so that allows you, integrity allows you to take action. So identity is the single most important thing that you can focus on. And so one of the first things that I focus on with a lot of my clients is like, who do you need to be in order to have all of these things that you want? So they list out all the things that they want to have, whether it is a healthier body. And by the way, this applies to a healthier bank account, right? Like the things that are most important and critical to our humanity are health, our wealth, and our relationships. Right? If you want to have something change around those three kind of life areas, then you need to figure out who do you need to be in order to do those things. And so it's this like really lovely domino effect. So, I'm constantly asking myself, are you being an essentialist right now? Or are you being a non-essentialist? Are you, like a duck underwater, like frantically swimming, but maybe not getting very far?
I love that imagery. And, it's so true. And just what I picture, like when you're focused on identity and who you need to be, like the actions you need to take become a lot clearer, because otherwise you've got like 50 million direction. It's like, do I need Noom? Do I need Weight Watchers? Do I need this? Do I need that? Do I need to weigh myself? Do I need to eat keto? Like you're just all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. So, my fitness brand was a beloved brand in Austin, Texas, and we won all of the awards, for 10 years straight. And my background, as I mentioned before, is in digital media and technology. I helped build out a Groupon-like product for a Fortune 5 company. And I knew that Groupon destroyed small and medium businesses. I mean, especially the restaurant vertical. I mean, it just, and so there's a kind of a digital, there was a digital membership. It was called ClassPass and FitMob. And there's a couple of other ones where they would go to studios, they would aggregate excess inventory, and they used like $5-10 million of venture money capital in order to subsidize the cost of the membership. So I was all of a sudden having to compete, not with other competitors, I was essentially having to compete with a free membership. So my membership was close to $200 a month, and ClassPass at the time was $49 a month. And they could go, clients could go to any studio. It was a great, it's a great customer value proposition. I didn't think it was going to impact me. My wait lists for my classes were like 20, 30 people long. People were clamoring to get into the studio. We made a decision to open up another location. And over the course of a summer, when people don't really work out a lot, kids aren't in school, people are on vacations, when they came back, my clients came back, I had double the overhead because we decided to open up a second location, $500,000 per unit, in order close to $500,000 to $750,000 to open up one brick and mortar location. Very, very expensive. And I came back in September and I had half of my revenue. So I am now, I'm trying to, all my competitors are trying to lower their prices. And I knew that was just a race to the bottom. And it was during that time where I had this, where a lot of my clients, it was right before the holidays, my clients were kind of coming to me, what can I do differently? And I had this idea for my first transformation program. We literally called it the transformation program because I didn't have a brand around it. I didn't name it. Like I told you, I didn't even build it. And as soon as I realized that I sold $20,000 in my first week, right around that time, I was reading the book Essentialism. I was like, this is the only thing that I should be focusing on. Fast forward to 6 months, I was able to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars in back paid rent because, we were completely underwater. We'd had impacted all of the lives of hundreds of women, fast forward 2 years. I was able to grow my staff. I was able to pay them more money. And I realized that the transformation program was the only thing that I should focus on. I stopped doing blog posts. I stopped doing all other, non-essential activities in my business, and my business flourished. And so that is the power of identity. It brings things into focus. You understand, you have a roadmap of how to get from point A to point B. Imagine, doing a road trip to California without a roadmap. You might get there eventually, but you're going to waste a lot of time, energy, and money, and there's going to be a lot of frustration. And so for me, this concept of identity is what makes me an essentialist. I know exactly where I need to focus, and everything else just kind of fades away. So it makes things crystal clear.
Yeah, which is huge. Like, when you have clarity, you can have forward progress and motion and all the things just start to walk the line. And that's, such an important piece. And I think it's probably a new message for a lot of people, even though I've talked about this periodically on the show. We're always looking for the next thing and the next, silver bullet, magic silver bullet, whatever it is. My dog is barking at somebody's here. Sorry. And it's, but it really, we can just ignore all that.
Yeah.
And focus on who we are.
Yeah. And the reality is there is no silver bullet. There is no knight in shining armor. Nobody is coming to rescue you. You have to find it inside of yourself in order to make the changes that you want to see in your life. And I think there's this message that, that you're going to find it externally. But the reality is if you look at the state of affairs in your life, what does your relationship with your partner look like? What does your bank account look like? Do you have a job that fulfills you? Do you have a body that you're ashamed of, or do you have a body? Everything that is in your external world is just a mirror of what's happening inside of you. Your external world mirrors your internal world. And if you want to change the external world, you have to change yourself. And that comes down to identity, who you are being. And so that is my message to everybody. We were all born with everything it is that we need in order to be successful in this world. Things may not be easy. There may be trials, there may be tribulations, but especially as women, as we start understanding that we are just these powerful human beings, and that as soon as we decide internally, we have this experience that something clicks, and that's a really around all of this identity work, I believe, at least it was for me. And it has been for a lot of my clients. That is what gives you the motivation to kind of keep going. So yeah, I mean, it really, I can't speak enough about this work. It has unlocked my power. It has unlocked my potential. It has created nothing but a life of possibilities. And even when stuff goes left, and I've had my fair share of really hard things happen in my life, that you have the ability to filter what that actually feels and looks like in your life. Because I'm not going to sit here and blow a bunch of sunshine, where the sun don't shine, and say that, like, everything's in flow and everything's amazing all the time. That is not the case. I actively experience friction in my life, but who I am choosing to be at an identity allows me to move through that friction with grace.
Absolutely. And there's, we're not saying it's easy, right? Like it's it's still hard work. It's
Yeah.
all that. But when you're really connected to who you are and you're showing up as the person you need, like you said, that you need to be in order to have the things that you want to
Yeah.
have, it all starts to align. So
And it's interesting because, I had this massive aha moment, a really long time ago, around identity work. And, I initially really put a lot of the identity work at the beginning of a lot of my programming. And it took me a while to understand that, that's not necessarily where people are. And I need to meet them, I need to meet them where they are in order to kind of give them some forward momentum. And so I've changed things up a little bit as far as, how I work with clients. And, I've been coaching people now, since 2010. So 2012, sorry. So it's been a minute. And,
yeah.
I believe that there's really a formula to how folks can get success around anything in their lives, whether it's, losing weight or making more money or being more successful or having a better relationship. And the first thing that I really think that you need is a strategy, right? And so
Yeah.
this is the roadmap. It's the roadmap that gets you from here to California, being as efficient as possible. And then you need to have some systems, and systems allow you to really take action, because if you want new results, you have to take new actions. And then within those systems, you need to have some structure. So order of operations. There are certain things that you should focus on first, because if you don't, you may be doing the right thing, but you may be doing it in the wrong order. And then for me, I really believe in simplicity, right? Because if things are difficult, right, humans are hardwired to do what? Two things: seek pleasure, avoid pain. So if the programs that people are doing are really difficult, the path is super difficult, there's a lot of friction all the time, then a lot of times, people are going to quit without that lack of simplicity. The fifth thing for me is sisterhood. And you need to, it doesn't have to be sisterhood. I do successes in my formula, but somebody that holds you accountable. And then you need to have some very early on success. And I really think that that's mission critical, because it's all in well, right? The way that I look at, like, a lot of identity work is folks are drowning, right? And you're telling them that they need to start, kind of philosophical, and what they need is a life preserver. And I think really quick success gives them that, like, life preserver that allows them to, like, get their head above water. And so, I've kind of changed. I'm constantly changing, as I'm growing, as I'm learning, I'm constantly changing, how folks, how I navigate folks through, through their own personal journeys. So I would say early success and then identity stuff are like the things that are really mission critical.
Absolutely. And I agree 100%. And so where do you look for that early success? Does it always have to be pounds lost? Can it
I actually don't focus on, I don't focus on weight at all. In all of my programs, you have an option, you have an option to opt out of any and all body compositions. I've said this a million times. Oh my gosh, I'm so fat. And if I had a quarter for every single time I said that, or one of my clients said that, but I also, I have fat on my body, but I also have hair and fingernails and eyelashes and skin. And I'm not walking around saying I am eyelashes or I am fingernails, but for some reason we identify as this like physical characteristic. And so, no, I personally don't focus on weight. That being said, I really believe that you need to meet people where they are. And I forget, there's a famous business person that said, sell them what they want and then give them what they need. And so look, I have, in one of my like early kind of mini programs, and this is the beginning of, it's the first 4 weeks of my extended program. I focus on 4 things, 1 thing per week, and that's it. So, the first week I give them a breakfast that is tailored to their adrenal stress level, because we know that adrenals and cortisol and lack of DHEA and all of these things really impact whether or not somebody's is able to lose weight. And so week 1, it's a simple breakfast. Week 2, it's adrenal stress level specific smart supplementation so that we can get some intelligent allopathy around like symptoms, around energy or something like that. And then sleep, and then movement. And everything that I do in my program is tailored around your bio-individuality. And I'm just allergic to one size fits all programs. And that is because your adrenals, your HPA axis, they impact your entire endocrine system, whether or not you are in fight or flight, in kind of survival mode. And we now understand that calories in and calories out is the biggest line of BS we've ever heard. It was built off of a lovely theory, the theory of thermodynamics, but we understand that that was meant to describe perfect process in a lab setting. And our lives are not labs. I mean, we do not live in like a vacuum. And so if you are, have one particular adrenal stress level, you may need to have strength as your kind of foundational movement. If you are in another stress level, you may need to have cardio as your foundational movement. If you are in a third, if you're crashed, you need to be doing neither and really be focusing on restorative movement. And so I think that one of the issues out there is that, you get somebody that may have had success around keto. They may have had success going vegan or vegetarian or plant strong, or intermittent fasting is a huge thing, right? And I understand that may work for somebody with a very specific metabolic fingerprint. And our metabolism is as unique as our fingerprints. And so if we do not understand what our metabolism is, what our bio-individual needs are around, the food that we're eating, or how much sleep we need, does caffeine work for us? Does caffeine not work for us? We end up, it may work for me, but it won't work for my sister-in-law, or it worked for my sister-in-law, but it's not going to work for me. And so I think it's super important, even for like my tiny program, that's like less than $50. There is a level of analysis and diagnostics to see where you are at. Because I would venture to say that the majority of the women that you work with, tried to eat less and move more, and probably gained more weight from that.
Yep.
So, to me, it's, like, if we understand that stress is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States, stress.
Mm-hmm.
That means you have some level of HPA axis dysfunction, right? Your hypothalamus signals your pituitary signals your adrenals. This happens within milliseconds. So this is that, sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, whether you're in fight or flight or rest or digest. And if we know that it's the sixth leading cause of death, then we understand that most people are operating within some form of like HPA axis dysfunction. And if we can't even, if and then they hear go keto, do intermittent fasting. And as you know better than anybody, I mean, you're incredibly trained and so intelligent. We know that keto and intermittent fasting are two of the worst things that you can do if you are, in certain, adrenal stress level phases.
Yeah.
It'll actually hurt. It makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I just think that there is a lot of irresponsibility that is happening kind of in the health and wellness industry, where everybody has, a hammer. And if all you have is a hammer, well, dang, everything sure looks like a nail, right? But maybe I'm a nail, maybe you're a screw, maybe somebody else is a pin, maybe somebody else is, you can't use this like one size fit all approach to helping folks.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think it's important to hear, like I say it a lot on the show, and, I've had my own weight loss success over the last few months, but does what I do work for everybody? No. We're all different. And so it's about finding, and even, in my programs and things I do, it's about finding what works for you, like becoming a master of yourself, because that's what's important.
Yeah. So. I think it's really important. The reality is you're more than a number. And, I won't even say it. I'm 43 years old right now, and my stress happened in utero. My, mother was a political refugee. She had an awful, situation at home. Your nervous system imprints on your children. Yeah. At an incredible, within the first, before kids are even born, then you can, throw in, a couple, a sexual assault, physical assaults, burning the candle at both ends, the environmental things that are happening with our food, with our water, with our soil. Stress, digital media. All of these things. I was a Division I athlete, so a lot of physical stress on the body. So now you're looking at, we had crazy things with our family happen. Lost my father, almost lost my mother. And this was during like 5 rounds of IVF. There's an incredible amount of stress. And I think one day I had this aha moment, and I was doing some therapy, and I had this aha moment in my shower where I kind of started going through this timeline of all of these things, all these experiences that I had had. And I finally realized that my body is acting exactly how it's supposed to under acute, prolonged stress. And my body is just trying to get my attention. And instead of looking at my body like the enemy, that it was failing me, I, for once, finally was able to look at the entirety of all of the stress, physical stress, biochemical stress, perceived emotional stress. Mm-hmm. And I was able to see how incredibly wise my body was. And for the first time, with 70 extra pounds on, I was able to actually love my body, have gratitude for my body. And for me, that was a really big shift. I was able to have much more compassion for myself. Because I think so many times women were just like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We are so used to running around the world with our hair on fire, ignoring that and taking care of our partners, our children, our employers, our employees, our friends, other family members, church groups, bake sales. And so we turn ourselves inside out for every single body but ourselves.
Yep.
And that is a losing way of being. And so again, we go full circle to, you have to be loving. I have coached over 10,000 women in my career now. And not one of them has been able to hate their bodies into submission. Not one. So this is a wake-up call, right? You cannot give what you do not have. So, it's the weight. I know we think it's important, but it's not. And you have to kind of start from this place of self-acceptance, and self-love, and that will empower you to take action and have something very different in your life.
Absolutely. There's a lot of power in what you just said. We cannot hate ourselves into submission.
You can't, not one.
Yeah.
Now, one of my clients
has
gotten out of the shower every single morning, called herself fat, told herself that she has no willpower and she's disgusting. I do not have one client, that's been able to make lasting changes in their lives by hating their bodies into submission. It just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Because you keep repeating the same attractive patterns and beating yourself up. So
exactly.
This has been an awesome conversation, which I knew it would be. So
thank you. I feel the same way.
Yeah. I'm honored that you came on and just shared your knowledge. Your perspective is unique, and I really, appreciate that and share it with you. So I'm just happy that you were able to come on and share that.
Well, I appreciate it. And I think you're amazing too. So, yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome.